I want to talk to you about the what's and the whys of arrow fletchings, and I'm going to be specific to vanes and a little bit more targeted towards compound archery. So you notice that we have a magnitude of vanes that we offer at Nock on Archery. However, there's also a number of different vanes that the industry offers to different people. So if you're new to archery, or even if you're at that intermediate level, you may not truly understand the benefits and the what's and the whys of all these different types of lengths, types of shapes, and really how they affect the arrow and what they do. So as a general rule of thumb, I'm just going to say that in the past, longer, bigger fletchings is what a lot of people chose to use because they have a lot of control. There's more surface area. So because of that, they're grabbing a lot more air as they're going through the air, and they start to stabilize much faster because there's more surface area. Just like having, a bigger fin in the water, if you were on a boat. So the bigger fletching is going to give you more surface area and more steerability. However, with more surface area, then comes more drag and more deceleration at a certain point, and deceleration leads to inaccuracy. And the more surface area, you can imagine if there was a wind blowing across this, even though this is let's not even factor that this is a large diameter shaft, let's only look at the vane. But a vane that's this big with wind blowing across it would have much more force drifting this arrow than if you had a much smaller vane that would have much less surface area for that wind to control. However, with less surface area comes less steerability and more dependability on the steering that's actually in the front of the arrow, which is the point leading the way. So this arrow here is actually the same arrow that I competed with for the majority of my medals, and you can recognize it as a very small wrap, but a very small fletching as well. And this is simply because when shooting at longer distance, I don't have anything on the front of this arrow that has surface area of its own, for example, a broadhead. So this small ballistic tungsten tip is heavy and it's leading the way, and this smaller fletch is giving stability and rotation to the arrow, helping its accuracy. Now, because it's a target arrow and it's a very small diameter, again, we don't have surface area on the front that's steering. This is perfectly suitable for target archery, and it has the least amount of drift in the wind because it has minimal fletching. It also has minimal diameter of the arrow, and it's fairly heavy too, so it's very stable. Now, this next one, that's kind of the next step up from what I competed with, is one of the Pro Max vanes. So this is a little bit smaller vane. It's a shorter profile than the next kind of step up from a hunting point of view, which is that Max Hunter. This Pro Max is a little bit shorter, but it is also a little bit taller. So this is kind of an in-between. And this particular arrow that I'm holding is actually Sharon's arrow. So this has a 6 fletch on it, and this was a configuration that I came up with Sharon because I wanted her to have the most amount of clearance with her sight scope. So I wanted a little bit lower profile vane, but because she shoots a fixed blade cut on impact head, I still need enough surface area back here that will overpower that surface area in the front and give me good rotation on the arrow. So by going to this 6 fletch configuration, I could shoot a small vane, but have enough control and steerability but also give us sight clearance for that sight coming down for the longer yardages. So this was a good in between. And again, by putting 6 on here, it's essentially giving me what would be equal to a vane that was twice as long. One of the things that I found on some of the shorter brace height bows, meaning where the string is on the nock and where your grip is, on some of the shorter brace height bows, which is common with youth bows or shorter draw length bows. So Sharon has a very short draw length. So she has a bow with a pretty short brace height. And because of that, if her fletching is too long, it actually interferes with the arrow rest when it's in the up position. So by having this shorter vane, it gives me that spacing I need so that the arrow can sit properly on the rest when the bow is hanging in a tree hanger. So that was my option. It's a little bit of a hybrid. This particular vane in a 4-fletch configuration could be a great choice for a 3D archer or someone go to a total archery challenge event where you're shooting an arrow where you want to have some good steerability, yet you also want to reduce that wind drift. The more fletchings you add, so here's my older style target. This is a long distance arrow, what I showed you first. It was a 3-fletch, very low profile vane, and I'm getting some rotation, but not a lot. Too much rotation will cause more deceleration downrange, and for a long distance arrow like this was, I need more stability at the longer ranges, not less. So by having 3 fletches, I had enough rotation to stabilize, but not too much to where it decelerated. Now Sharon's arrow, on the other hand, is going to be spinning very fast. It looks like a pink golf ball going through the air. Spins very quickly, but it also decelerates fairly quickly too. So she has limitations to how far this arrow is going to travel, but also in a hunting situation, how far she'd be able to shoot before that arrow's decelerating to the point where it either becomes inaccurate or just loses the power in order to kill. However, because she's a low poundage, short draw length shooter, we recognize the limitations and the barriers. So this vane fits the barrier that we're within, which she is just not going to take a shot near the length of most shots at a total archery challenge, or even most shots that the average guy that's going out is going to take. She really keeps her shots close, where this arrow's spinning fast, spinning true, not really worrying about deceleration. Now, this next vane right here this is actually a PM 2.0, which is that front vane there. And this is a vane that I personally shoot for most of my total archery challenge setups. This particular vane gives me enough steering for a field point, and it also reduces the amount of wind drift that I have on my longer shots. Now, I want to have a little bit more rotation than if I only had a 3-fletch. I really like the quietness and the accuracy of a 4-fletch, so I shoot this smaller vane on a little bit bigger diameter shaft than what I used to shoot competitive target archery with. I personally feel like for me, going to the Total Archery Challenge events, this setup gives me a lot of benefits. One, the arrow is a little bit lighter, so it's going to give me more distance just because of the speed that I'm gaining compared to a hunting arrow. However, because this is such a low profile vane configuration, and when it's getting shot through my bow, it's in that X formation, I can bring my sight as low as possible to that arrow shaft, giving me the ability to shoot as far as I possibly can, giving the arrow that's being launched through my bow. The PM 2.0 is just a perfect vane for a 5mm Easton shaft, which I really prefer. I love this axis. The match grade is ideal for consistency, both in weight and straightness. So from my testing, this has proven to be an awesome combination for those total archery challenge events. Now, the next step up is going to be a vane that kind of resembles the one that I hunt with. This one here is a max, which is just about 3 inches. This one's a little bit shorter. It's a little bit longer than 2. But it is a low profile vane similar to the max. It's just a little bit reduced in ratio. Now this vane here has actually proven very good for me in places where I know that I'm hunting and there's the possibility of shots that are longer in distance, and also areas where there's more open country and there's more wind to worry about. Now, if I shot this particular setup, what I'll tell you is I would make sure that I'm shooting a very compact, expandable style head. So this arrow is going to give me minimal wind drift compared to this one. It's going to be lighter in weight because there's less material. The forefletch is going to give me very good rotation and plenty of steering for an expandable that's completely closed and compact when in flight. So this was a good option. However, it doesn't really give me the option to have enough steerability when speeds get too high with a broadhead, or when you choose to shoot a fixed blade broadhead, which then has its own steering capability on the front of the shaft. So the next fletching is the one that we offer in our pre-fletch division for arrows, because this is the #1 setup that I've been using for multiple years for hunting. This particular size vane and combination gives me the most amazing choices of what type of broadheads that I want to use. Last year I shot several different types of broadheads throughout my entire fall, and this particular vane size and configuration just gave me enough stability and steering to have a lot of options for what was on the front of it. Now this next one here is, again, a very long vane that kind of goes back in time. A 4-inch vane is going to cause a few issues in current equipment because, again, if you've got a shorter brace height bow, let's say your bow has a 6-inch brace height and your arrow rest is a little bit behind there where it's sitting behind the shelf, now you have prongs that are in an up position with vanes that are a little bit too long, and they're kind of sitting in there, so as you draw, they'll bump down into the trough as you pull back. Now my experience with fletching types and configurations is pretty vast. Actually, there was a time, this is a box of arrows that I have from one hunting season where I actually did a lot of plotting and testing, where I had 4 different types of shafts and also 4 different brands and types of fletching that all were plotted on targets to show me the results of a shorter high profile vane, a little bit quieter style, a longer shape that might offer better steering for a fixed blade head, etc., and how all these types of fletchings performed on either the lightest shaft or the heaviest shaft. And I can tell you that out of all that testing, I've kind of settled on what gives me the most ability to be able to have an accurate arrow with a magnitude of variables. It's really difficult to talk to someone specifically about what fletching is perfect for them if you factor in the different variables that some people have. For example, some people have more facial tissue or they have more facial hair, that if they were to shoot a very high profile vane that's short and high like this, you have the ability to have more contact with your face because of your fletching clearance. So that person might actually benefit more by having a little bit lower profile shape, something that's swept back, or maybe even adding additional fletching to their system. Now, one of the things that we do offer is we have a sample pack of vanes at knockonarchery.com that gives you multiple vanes in all the different types of shapes. And for those, what I recommend people do is take 5 or 6 arrows and fletch all of them with a different length vane or vane configuration, and be able to go out and shoot them not only at 20 yards, but also shoot them at your further distances. And you'll be able to recognize, one, how they group, which is really important, if not the most important, and two, how much one vane style drops compared to another based on it having more surface area, grabbing more wind, and starting to fall lower than the target versus something that's not only lighter but also lower profile and just has less overall drag. Now, what you're going to find though is, even though you might love that this particular vane might, shoot 2 yards better for height versus a longer profile vane, what you may find is as soon as you put your preferred broadhead on, a short high profile vane may not actually be as accurate as what you're seeing in marketing compared to these other configurations. Now, what I'll say is the arrows that we offer as a pre-fletch and the jigs that we offer are set to what I feel is the best neutral ground for offering a super stable arrow that's incredibly accurate and works at a magnitude of draw lengths, arrow shaft diameters, and broadhead choices. And that's this configuration here, which you see me hunt with all the time. This is the max vane that is about, I think it's a 2.8 inch or a 2.7 inch in a 4-fletch configuration at 2.5 degrees offset. So, and I personally shoot mine in a right helical versus a left, simply because of how you tighten on a broadhead onto the arrow shaft and how I want that arrow rotating through the air. Now, what I'll tell you is, as you increase the angle or the helical of your fletching, it will stabilize faster because it's grabbing more air as it's propelling. However, it will decelerate faster as well. So you kind of have to play it out of, do I want an arrow that's at its best benefit from distance A to B, or do I want an arrow that if I have to shoot to distance C, it's starting to decelerate to the point where either it's really falling off the map and you're not able to achieve those longer distances because of rotation, or are you starting to just lose accuracy because of that deceleration as well? So I've tried everything from no helical and no offset to a 1 degree to a 1.5, 2s, 2.5s, 3s, and literally a wrap that looks like it's just twisting around the arrow. Certainly, if you want rotation, the higher angles or the higher degree of offset are going to give you that. However, there will be a deceleration downrange that's going to cost you in accuracy. Again, for me, out of all of these, for my tack hybrid bow or the bow that you see me shooting during the off season, I'm going with these shorter vanes in a 4-fletch configuration, again at a 2.5 degree offset. And for hunting, I'm choosing the max in this 2.8 that is, again, at 2.5 degrees for an offset. But that's giving you the pros and the cons to different types of vanes and how they affect different types of arrows, different types of bow setups, depending on whether you're a short draw, low poundage shooter versus someone that's shooting an average type poundage, or someone that's shooting a bigger diameter shaft like this. So before I finish, if I was shooting indoors and I was shooting a large diameter shaft like this, and I didn't want to shoot this long 4-inch fletching because of my rest clearance, then all I would need to do is go to this shorter one and go to a 4-fletch configuration, which you've seen me shoot indoors. So instead of having 3 4-inch fletches, I've got 4 3-inch fletches. So the overall surface area is the same, giving me the rotation that I need to stabilize a big, heavy arrow like that at that short distance that I do for indoor target archery. But these are all awesome to play with. If you like experimenting, I can tell you one of the things that I tell people I'm totally 2 thumbs up about is learning ballistics, and how vanes and vane shapes and vane configurations can affect accuracy is really something that only you are going to know for your particular setup if you get out there and try the different variations for yourself. You know now what the pros and the cons are. Grab a sample pack, get out there and see for yourself what works the best.